So excited to see so many people on here today. As I mentioned really quickly, I have one of my amazing clients, Jacqueline from Tasteful Life blog, joining me today. We are going to dive into a conversation that we were having behind the scenes and that I felt was really important to highlight and to bring to you and to include everybody in. We don't know all the answers in regards to how how all of this plays out, but we wanted to start a conversation about it and to talk a little bit more about it. Hi, Jacqueline. I'm going to add her on here. Jacqueline is a mom. She is an incredible blogger with her blog Tasteful Life, where she shares her motherhood journey and delicious, beautiful recipes and just more about her lifestyle. Okay, let me get her on here. We're going to be talking about navigating the whole Black Lives Matter conversation with a woman, which obviously I know nothing about and she knows everything about. So I'm so thrilled to have her joining in right now. For those of you who are watching, hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I'm very excited.
I'm so pumped. Okay, before we get started, everyone who's tuned in right now, can you say a quick hi? Tell us your name, because we can see all of your amazing handles, but sometimes those aren't your name. Tell us your name, where you're tuning in from. Also, make sure you head on over and follow Jacqueline at Tasteful Life.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, feel free to ask your questions throughout this conversation as well. I'm going to be keeping my eye on the questions, and I will ask them at the end. We will answer them at the end, but please let us know, where are you from? Ayla's here from Vancouver. Amazing. What were you going to say?
No, go ahead. I don't hear from people. See where people are joining in. Oh, I see. Oh, my sister-in-law,
Yeah.
my friend Almond,
Yay!
Michaela,
From
Kat,
Detroit.
Mandy.
Awesome. Okay, so for anybody who's just joining in right now, and we haven't met, my name's Erin. I am from Vancouver. I'm a health coach, founder of Raw Beauty Co. I've had the pleasure of working with Jacqueline, who's obviously an incredible woman. And as I was mentioning before, we were doing some work together and we started to have this conversation around what it means to be a biracial woman in today's current climate, and you sort of navigating how to find your voice and your place as the wife of a man who is Black and having a son who is Black. And so I wanted to say at the very beginning, with any of these conversations, as we bring it up, we are not necessarily here saying that we have the answers. It's just we're talking about it. We wanted to spark up some conversation.
Yeah.
So, Jacqueline, can you start off by just telling everyone a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm originally from Washington, D.C. As you all know, I am biracial. My mother's ancestry is Scottish and Irish, and my father's is Haitian. And, I did not grow up with a lot of hard struggles, and I will not paint the picture as if I did, but I have had some challenges that I'm going to talk about that I hope can help shed a light on what it's like to be biracial. And, I want to say that every biracial person's story is different. Everyone's experience is different, and that's based on, a number of different factors. And, I can only speak to my truth and what my experience has been like. And, being biracial is a beautiful thing, but it's also a very complex thing. It can feel like you are constantly straddling between two worlds and trying to find your identity in either one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, growing up, as a kid, I didn't really fit in with the Black kids. I fit in more with the white kids. But it was odd because I knew that I was clearly different than everyone else in my friend group. And, after a while, I kind of got used to being the only Black girl in the group. And it was odd because, to the Black kids, I was considered white, and to the white kids, I was considered Black. So I was always kind of trying to figure out which one I fit in with most. And to be honest, I didn't really feel like I fit in with either of them, and I never identified as white. I always identified as biracial, and I acknowledged both sides. And, it was a little bit of a struggle. And it wasn't really something that I really thought much about when I was younger. it didn't happen until later on in life. And, you know, my parents, they divorced when I was 3. I grew up with my mom. I was with her on the week and my dad on the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
And then that switched in the middle of high school, and I moved in with my dad and my stepmom, and I was with them during the week and my mom on the weekends. And the new school I went to was totally different than the previous one. It was in a rural area. It was kind of segregated. You know, I went to school with kids who drove tractors to school sometimes and had Confederate flag belts and had flags on their cars. And,
Wow.
you know, I found myself feeling like I had to choose whether, you know, I was going to hang out with the black kids or if I was going to hang out with the white kids. And when I say the white kids, I don't mean the kids that were repping the flag.
Yeah.
There was a lot of them, but you know, they were in their own group.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was a little tough. And yeah, it was tough. I mean, I had friends in both groups, but I never really feel like I had a true place that I belonged, where I had people who kind of knew what I was going through.
Mm.
And then fast forward, yeah, go ahead.
I'm just curious to know if anybody who's tuned in right now is biracial, or if what like what race people identify with who are watching right now. And then when you mentioned that being in elementary school and high school, you're trying to find and navigate your way and find your place amongst people. When you were in, let's start with elementary school, and you mentioned that you were kind of hanging out more with the white group.
Mm-hmm.
So did you immediately notice as young as elementary school that there was segregation, that there was 2 different groups, or was it just like, this is, I'm finding my friends,
I'm finding my friends. Yeah, I didn't
Okay.
realize it until probably the middle of high school, and I went to that new school.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
And then at the new school, did it
Yeah.
then feel like, okay, there's a group over here and there's a group over here
Yes.
based on race? It did.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then fast forward to college, you know, I went to West Virginia University. It was close enough, but also far enough from home. And I found myself yet again trying to find where I fit in most. You know, it was at a point in my life where I was kind of desperate to make friends. I didn't have a ton of friends in high school since I had moved in the middle of high school. And I knew the best way to go about that would be to join a sorority. And I remember, you know, the first week of sorority orientation week, being on the green and seeing the different sororities set up. And, you know, you could go around to the tables and introduce yourself. And, you know, I remember one of the black sororities coming, and they actually weren't a part of Greek life. They were independent. They came and performed a step, which is a choreographed dance. And it was something like I'd never seen before. I was just completely blown away. You know, you could see their unity. You could tell they were one. And as I was standing there watching, I just couldn't help but feel like an outsider. And when that time came to choose a sorority, I chose a majority white sorority. Again, because at the time that was what I was used to and, you know, what I was comfortable with. And it wasn't until after college that I really started to embrace my black side and, you know, make an effort to be a part of black circles and, you know, really ask myself how I identified. And, you know, there were certain experiences that I went through that really had me sit back and ask myself that. And that mainly happened when I moved to Washington, D.C. to Kentucky. You know, so I met my husband, Robert, in D.C. We got married in D.C. And then 2 weeks later, we moved to Kentucky. He had a promotion. And, you know, there were some experiences where women in the workplace or in my neighborhood, you know, white women would be like, hey, sister, hey, girl. And, you know, they wouldn't say that to anyone else. Or,
Right.
you know, I remember being in my office and working and someone coming up and putting their fingers through my hair, you know, without permission and asking me questions about my hair, and just these microaggressions that would happen that I was noticing, or things that were said that then really started to hit different. You know, and even little things I know, well, actually not little things, things that I noticed, like, you know, out of the few black women in my workplace, we all had the lowest title and the lowest pay at the time. And, you know, I then even found myself not wanting to put myself in certain situations. So, you know, I love to thrift. I love to antique. That's something I love to do. And there was one of those by my house, and I didn't even feel comfortable going because I wanted a white person with me. And I actually waited until my mom came to visit to go. So it was kind of the first time in my life that I realized people weren't viewing me as, you know, Jacqueline, just this biracial girl. It was the first time that I saw that the people were viewing me as a black woman, and they were treating me as a black woman. And that was something that I never really thought about myself. So I just be like, oh, well, the world sees me as a Black woman, how do I identify? You know, I never really put a lot of thought into it until later on in life.
And so it sounds like being viewed as a Black woman, there is different treatment. There is systemic racism alive and well. And whether it's like the touching of hair, which I'm curious, I want to ask you about that because I think that I'm curious to know, like, if it comes from a place of curiosity, then, but it's still, I'm trying to think of like, what's the difference between a group of friends and your girlfriend gets her hair done or like gets her hair colored or whatever. And, you know, we all talk about this kind of thing, right? We notice as women things about one another and comment on it. So did you feel like whenever somebody was like asking to touch your hair, that
not even asking, but yeah,
not even asking
when it was happening, yeah,
just touching it?
yeah, I think it comes from they want to know how to classify me. Oh, what are you? Where are you from? But no, what are you? What, you know, and, you know, if they know I'm half Black, you know, maybe that makes it easier in their mind to put me in a box, and then they know how to approach me that way. You know, that I thought most of the time that's what it was. You know, some people may be curious, you know, but, you know, how'd you get your hair like this? Do you actually curl each one every day? Like, you know, just all these, just these things. And I think it's an ignorance that people, they're just not aware of. And I don't think they mean harm by it. I don't.
But I think that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, is so that there is more awareness about these are the types of things that might just be being said off the cuff, but that cannot feel great, that feel that don't. Yeah,
I've even found that in the workplace, you know, people saying like, "Oh gosh, you're really cracking the whip," or, you know, "You're a slave driver," "You're, you know, just making comments." And I'm like, am I invisible here? Like, who says things like that? Or, you know, even when I moved to Texas, I was surprised that, you know, in my neighborhood, there were skeletons that were hanging from trees, like lint, for Halloween.
On Halloween, right? You mentioned
for Halloween, like with a noose around their neck. And I don't think people meant anything by it. I think it's just Halloween decorations. But to a Black person and to people of color, I found it incredibly offensive. And, you know, I'm like, gosh, I have to walk through my neighborhood for the next 3 weeks and see this every day. Like, what's going to happen when my son's old enough to recognize those things? Like, I don't want them going to that house. And it's something Robert and I were kind of talking about. And we said, you know what, instead of judging this person, let's go to the house. Let's go to the house and see what they're like. And we did that. We put Micah in the stroller. We introduced ourselves. We said, hey, you know, we're new to the neighborhood. And they were the nicest people.
Which, I mean, I think just goes to show again that there is this privilege of not understanding the things that we say or the actions that we take and how that might impact people. And there's a privilege in not understanding that, in not having had to dive into it, that history. And so I think that's why these types of conversations are so important. And at the end of the day, as you know, I've really learned, it isn't your job to teach us this stuff. We've been sitting back in our privilege and, you know, not doing the work to understand and to be better neighbors and human beings. And so I appreciate deeply you being here today to talk about your experience and share this, as it's not something that you should have to ever do. But I do think that it you know, it's so like, it takes an incredible amount of vulnerability to share your story and to not know all the answers, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny when you asked, when we were doing our coaching call and you're like, you know, do you want to do a live to talk about this? I was like, what? Like, you know, it's always something that's like been internal in my mind that I've never actually talked about, even with my family, my parents, my husband. You know, it's always been internal, and, you know, having to figure out a way to articulate it so that it makes sense to other people is, you know.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know, with, you know, this conversation around Black Lives Matter just really like blowing up over the last few weeks after George Floyd's death, you were finding it challenging to know how to voice and express what you were feeling as a biracial woman. Like, do I get to speak as a Black person? Do I have privilege as well as a biracial person? And trying to navigate all of this.
Yeah.
where have you landed in sort
Yeah.
of determining how to use your voice, or how you can or cannot use your voice in this conversation?
Mm. Yeah, growing up, my parents didn't talk much to me about race. They're amazing people and incredible parents, but they did what so many parents do, which is to raise your child with the belief that everyone is equal and everyone is the same, and to not see color. And, to them, I was just Jacqueline.
Yeah.
I know that I need to create a different culture within my immediate family that's very different than how I grew up. And when I think about, how to do that, there are times when my insecurities have come up of comments that have been made by other Black girls when I was younger. I would hear in my head, like, you don't have the right to talk about, the Black community and what it's like to be Black. And, you didn't live it. You're a white girl, or you're a white Black girl. You talk white. What do you think you're better because you have lighter skin? Or, you're an Oreo, or, just these things that I've heard as I was younger. It did sting, but I learned later in life that, I don't need anyone to validate my Blackness. And I didn't realize that until later. And I think that was something that I was always looking for, is that I wanted my Blackness to be validated, especially by other Black women. And, I felt the effects of colorism within my own Black community, because that does exist. And that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, of this, the insecurities of some people that, do believe that, the whiter the better, and white is right. And, with having lighter skin or a different hair texture or different features, or if you're able to pass as white, that you're able to have different experiences and privileges compared to someone who has a darker skin tone. And it's sad, but it's very real. And I don't blame the younger girl, the girls that may not have been the nicest to me as I was younger. I understand where that was coming from.
Right.
And that I can't blame that on them. I can only really blame myself and take responsibility myself for allowing other people to tell me who I am and to tell me how I should identify. That's on me. And, I wish I could go back to my younger self and not, I could just have a better sense of self. I think that's the kind of thing about being older. I wish I could have a conversation with my younger self, But I found that, as I started to expose myself to more Black circles right after college, that the Black women I've come across, they're not the mean girls at the lunch table or on the bus. They're just not. And that, just because my experience may be different than someone else's doesn't mean that it's not valid. It doesn't mean that I'm not a Black woman. It doesn't mean that I can't, fight for the Black community and stand with them and be a part of this movement and teach my children about what it means to be Black and to love their Black skin and to love their Black hair. I can still do all of those things because at the end of the day, I still have the same fears as the rest of Black women. And that is that our husbands, our children, our fathers, our uncles, our nephews, our friends, that they could very well not come home one day.
Yeah, that is the greatest fear of any mother. I don't care what color skin you have, but for you to have this up-leveled threat just based on the skin color of your child, that puts them at risk. That is, I mean, it's why, like, being able at some level to identify with the discomfort and anger and fear and pain that must bring to you as a mom, being a mom myself, it's like really lit the fire within me. And I think so many other white women who, to step up and to start doing this work at a bigger level. So speaking of being a mom and a wife to a Black man, how are you navigating this conversation in your home? Like, Micah's, how old is he? He's young.
He'll be 2 in August, and I'm pregnant, and my daughter's due in October. So we have some time. We've talked about it at a high level. We haven't really got into it yet, but I don't think we have a ton of time. I think these things do have to start early with kids when it comes to books. Start with books, teaching You know, we know that we want to teach our kids to love their Black skin, to be proud of who they are, to know that they're not invisible, to make sure that there is, you know, representation around them, you know, and the importance of that, and to just continue keeping the conversation going. And, you know, and it will evolve and it will develop as they get older. You know, there will come a time when Robert and I need to sit down with our kids and have the talk, which is what all Black families have with their kids, which is when, you know, you got to let them know that you can't operate the same way that, you know, Timmy does next door, because, you know, you don't get 3 chances. You may not even get 1 chance. You have to operate very differently in this world. So, yeah, we haven't dug deep into it yet, but, you know, we're on the same page on how we need to approach it. And I'm so thankful to have Robert's guidance in that. You know, I've learned so much about even what it is like growing up to be Black and to be a Black man, you know, in America and in the corporate world and all of those things. And we also have a great support network too. Like, there is Black mothers who I always go to. Like, if I have a question or I need some advice, you know, I have women who I know I can go to. My best friend Kat, I have Jennifer, I have my friend Marsha. You know, I have this community of other women that I know that I can go to, because I don't know it all. As being a biracial woman, and, you know, being around, having my friend group be a majority of white girls until, you know, after college, you know, there's a lot that I need to know. I don't claim to know it all. There's still a lot that I have to learn. And I don't think there's any shame in saying that. You know, I think that you just have to start somewhere.
I love that. Everything that you've said, you have been so gracious with just showing up really vulnerably and speaking your truth right now, and sharing that you are, you know, right there in figuring out this whole space and how that looks. Is there anything that you would like, you know, knowing that there's mamas from all different races and religions that will tune into this, anything that we can do to support, to show up better in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, you know, advice to other women who want to know how to support Black women and women of color: know that you don't have to be perfect in this, the way that you show up. You don't have to be perfect. You know, I've had so many white women, especially, reach out to me after my blog post and say, you know, I want to help. I don't know how. I feel so naive. I feel ignorant in the topic. I don't have any Black people in my family or that I'm close to. Where do I start? Do I say Black? Do I say people of color? Do I capitalize the being? How do I go about teaching my kids these things? You know, and but just know, Black people will never shame you for wanting to stand with us and to, you know, fight for us and for our rights and for equality. That's all we want. We want fairness. And, you know, we will never judge you if you don't know the best way to go about it. There's tons of different ways, but just start somewhere and start educating yourself. Read books. If you don't like reading, there's Audible. Watch documentaries. You know, speak up when you see something wrong. Say something when, you know, someone in your family at the dinner table may say something racist, you know. Peacefully protest, sign petitions, and most importantly, vote with the majority and minority in mind, and continue to care about this and have this momentum when we feel like things are back to normal and we feel safe again. You know, remember that, as we've heard, that this has to be a movement, not just a moment.
Yes. Oh, I love that. There right now are more resources that are easy to find than ever before, which is incredible. So there's really no excuse to kind of hide away from this. And as she said, start by educating yourself. Start by reading and listening, not trying to solve immediately from, you know, whatever space it is that you're in, but listen to the words, the requests, the history, the stories. We're all taking in copious amounts of media. So it is all around right now. I know this community is here for it when it comes to the big conversations and the hard work. So get after it. Jacqueline, I would love to switch gears a tiny bit. I mean, all of this plays into one another, to just talk a little bit about Tasteful Life blog and the work that you're doing there, because I love it so much. And you're obviously working hard on this amidst having a young baby and being very pregnant. Can you tell everyone who's listening a little bit about Tasteful Life?
Yeah, Tasteful Life. I started Tasteful Life in early 2019, shortly after the birth of my son, Micah. I was a new mom, a new stay-at-home mom in a new city, just looking to connect with people and to have a positive, creative outlet for myself. And, it's a place where I share my favorite recipes, how I balance being a wife and a mom, all while keeping my identity.
And you were working before you had Micah as well. So part of your whole journey has been figuring out like, am I going to go back to work? Which I think is a lot
Mhm.
something so many women can relate to is this
Yeah,
conversation around
yeah.
roles and everything.
Mhm.
What were you doing before motherhood?
Yeah, so before I was a program director at a medical school, the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine, and I worked in the admissions office. I also worked closely with the diversity and inclusion department, and I kind of spearheaded our marketing department. So I worked in higher education.
Love it. So for
Yeah.
anybody who is out there who is trying to figure out their career path, navigating motherhood, navigating relationships,
Yeah.
who wants some inspiration in the kitchen and who wants to hear more of Jacqueline's voice, please head on over and follow her at Tasteful Life. Jacqueline, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for listening and for, tuning in. I really appreciate it. If you have further questions, just feel free to DM me. I'm always looking to connect with new people.
Amazing. I love it. You've got so many girls here who are already fans of you. Thanks so much for tuning in,
Uh,
everyone. Have an awesome day.
Thank you. Thanks, Erin.
Bye.
Bye.